Chimaev versus Burns, what went wrong? I must tell you, I'm stealing that headline from the kids over the underground, so if you recognize this, yes, I admit it, but this was huge. Pages upon pages. Stays at the top of the page. This is the hottest topic over there. What went wrong? Guys, I have a problem with that premise. I don't think anything went wrong. I don't think these guys could have looked any better. Now, we do need to show respect to Gilbert Burns. This was the number 2 guy in the world. Gilbert Burns, arguably, is the closest to beating Kamaru Usman we've ever seen. Arguably. It's down to Burns versus Colby. Right? I mean, Colby got 25 minutes with him, and it was a good, hard fight. Okay, but he made him work. Can we agree to that? Burns is just very different. That whole fight was less than 8 minutes, but Burns hurt Kamaru at one point. Had him doing the wobble legs, and Usman had to regroup, and then Usman chose to stay on the feet. I mean, it's just this awesome battle where both of those guys look great. But if you did want to say who gave Kamaru the hardest time, you would be down to 2. Because of that moment that he had with Burns, or the long, drawn-out evenings that he had with Colby. There's not a third. There's not a fourth. This is how good Gilbert Burns is. Gilbert Burns is like Midas, guys. Everything he touches turns to gold. He touched the jiu-jitsu world. He grabbed gold 3 times. He goes out to Abu Dhabi. He's on the medal stand. I mean, everything this guy does, he does very well. He finds a way. He's done this over 2 different weight classes. He got remotivated. I hear he's in the gym, and, he's just one of those attitudes within the gym, and he's always there and never miss practice. You hear all these things around Gilbert Burns, and I feel as though maybe that wasn't loud enough because Chimaev sucked all the air out of the room. It's very hard, guys, to have multiple stars at one time. Every time we will see the end of an era, people will talk to Dana as though Dana needs a pep talk. As though, hey, man, we're still here for you. We realize that some hard times are ahead. I mean, I can just remember that. I was there when Tito and Randy left in the same month. Every single pay-per-view, of which there was 6 per year, rotated between Tito being the main event and Randy being the main event. And if Randy was the main event, then wait till the next one because Tito will be the main event. These were the guys. There wasn't a number 3. There was not a number 4. These guys called in sick. It is going to change our industry. But there was 2 guys. 2 guys spread over 6 shows. That's kind of a lot. But you'll remember WWE days when you had The Rock and Stone Cold at the same time. It's rare. 2 to 3 stars is all that you need, and it's all that you get. And I don't want to be a condescending prick towards football and other sports. You guys know that I don't follow, but I could not name 3 basketball players for you. I go with LeBron. There's a guy named Durant who I think is still playing. And I for sure could come up with a third one. Maybe my example wasn't absolute, but I would do the same thing with football. I could tell you about Tom Brady. I could tell you about this quarterback that made news. He and Joe Rogan were teaming up, and it had something to do with COVID. I don't even know if he played this year. I think his name's Roethlisberger. I mean, it's tough. That's not me being a jerk. If you can get 2 to 3 stars in an interview, that's all you need. When Jordan was doing it, wasn't other great players. So there was only so many people where they're going to put their money and time behind it. They wanted the absolute best guy. Nike did it with Jordan. It's just one of those things. You don't need 5 guys. You're never going to have 10. But the question always comes, how come there's so few at a time? And it's back to The Rock versus Austin. There was other guys that as soon as Rock and Austin stepped aside, it was those same guys. They have to go find somebody new. They have to go sign some new talent. They took the same guys that were already there, give them the attention. Now they suck the air out of the room. Now they become the 2 biggest stars, and everybody else is just waiting for their turn. I remember when Ronda Rousey was going to leave the sport, the way people talked to her, what are you going to do? You're losing your biggest star. What are you going to do? It was one of those things. But whoever was going to come next was already there. You get Conor, it's just a tremendous draw. But Conor all but has left the sport. I believe he's had 2 fights in 5 years. Am I close on that? Because he did the boxing thing. Didn't he come back and only fight Poirier twice? I don't think there was another one in there. Then he come back, I guess, the boxing, but Khabib was after that. I mean, what I'm trying to share for you is regardless of who's there and when they're there, and regardless of what kind of a star they are, you can only have so many at a time. So Gilbert Burns, who has all of these wonderful stories you could talk about, Gilbert Burns has the same amount of straight-up badasses right out of Stanford MMA that are willing to put their name on him. Kamaru Usman being one of them, just by example. Derek Brunson telling anybody that was willing to listen. Vincent Luque telling anybody that was paying attention just how good Gilbert Burns is, but that all got drowned out. Gilbert Burns being a 3-time jiu-jitsu champion of the world, which you probably didn't know. Gilbert Burns being 3rd in Abu Dhabi, which you probably didn't know. Gilbert Burns still being an active grappling competitor, which you probably didn't know. It's not because those stories aren't just as good as Chimaev's. It's just Chimaev's got told. Chimaev's stories just simply got told. So I don't know that anything went wrong. I thought Chimaev looked awesome. I resist this concept that Chimaev under-delivered. He was confronted with something that we didn't know he was going to be confronted with, which was a really hard match. He was confronted with an opponent who he could not just go tackle whenever he wanted. He could not just go hit this opponent and make him wilt. This opponent punched back. Chimaev was in a very difficult spot that most 24-year-olds with very limited experience, he's only done this twice in the weight class. He's only done this 4 times in total. Oh, by the way, he hadn't been out there 15 minutes. Collectively. Somewhere along the way, he thought he was going to lose his life to the coronavirus. But there was so many things against Chimaev. Chimaev did awesome. I will not hear otherwise. And guys, what do you want? And what do you want? The greats do something that had never been done before. That's true. Georges St-Pierre hit a double leg, and he finished it different than anybody had ever done in the sport before or since. Georges St-Pierre would get in on a double leg. You're supposed to plant your feet and lift with your knees. He would extend it to his tiptoes. George would grab an opponent and basically do a calf raise. But those 2 inches that would take him off the ground while he's holding his opponent took his opponent off the ground. Very different. We've never seen it before. Khabib Nurmagomedov entangling legs on the ground has never been done before. Now we're seeing everybody trying to do it, and we're seeing that whole group of boys out of Dagestan, Khabib's guys, doing it. But we had never seen it before. We never saw somebody get a takedown and then do a body triangle, but on the legs only to distract you so that he could pound it. We just never seen it. The greats do something different. Muhammad Ali with his huge, incredible reach and a big mouth. Mike Tyson, very short to the ground, short arms, but absolute power. The greats always do something different. I get that Chimaev hasn't shown us that yet. What his thing is yet. But I would then challenge you back to tell me one thing that he did that a great doesn't do. He got met with adversity. He found himself in a fight, not a match of aggression. He's the number 11 ranked guy. You guys are the ones talking about the rankings. I don't. I think they're garbage. I don't think you should be able to go from number 11 to number 2 unless somebody in the ranking room didn't do their job. Chimaev's not any better today that he's going to be ranked number 2 than he was a week ago when you put him at 11. So you in the ranking rooms screwed up. But if you do take a number 11 guy and you put him with the number 2 guy, oh, by the way, it's 15-minute war and the number 11 guy wins, you pat him on the back. You tell him good job. How is there a thread going on one of the leading sources for information and opinion within our industry, acting as though Chimaev has explaining to do? What part of the fight if you're coaching him? If you know MMA and you're coaching Chimaev, what part of the fight does he need to improve? What part of that fight did you see that you're going to say, well, you can't go do that with Kamaru? What was it? Were his hands in the wrong spot? Were his feet not moving? Did he not have head movement? Was he not transitioning from strikes to clinches back to strikes? Was he not active on the ground? Was he not posturing, pinning, and pounding? What was it that he did that if you're coaching him, you would tell him to do different? And I think that that's where you run into the problem. Well, nothing. It just turned out Gilbert Burns fought back. Okay. Then this is an entire session of praising Gilbert Burns. MRI. Much like Crypto.com. Exact same format. Turn it over to you guys. Who do you, the fan, you don't have to buy in, you don't have to get a ticket, this isn't a raffle. Who do you put your opinion on? Which is purely blocked and monitored by one thing, which is known as an IP address, which means each person can only vote one time. Who do you think should win? The MRI community put a $40,000 bonus on Gilbert Burns. The Crypto.com community put a bonus on Jan. 2 guys that got beat. That has simply never been done before. I love that. Sometimes your greatest victories are going to come in defeat. I've never thought of the night should only exclusively go to anything, not the main card, not to the undercard, not just to the big star, not just the championship fight, not just the men, not just the win. But that includes the guy that got second. The guy that got second could put on one of his most valiant performances ever, and it's okay for us to recognize him for that. That's not a bad thing. But what went wrong with Chimaev, unless you can tell me, what did Chimaev do that you're seeing that you thought was a lack of experience or a lack of skill? What was it that you saw that could be exploited by an athlete, in this case, Kamaru Usman, the champion? What is it that he needs to fix, that he needs to clean up, that he needs to change? And I don't think that you're going to have an answer to any of those things because he fought an awesome fight. Chimaev looked great. It just wasn't a battle of aggression. That's one way. Punches and the kicks going one way. We've seen plenty of people come in with a whole bunch of hype, and they were so goddamn good. And then they're met with a little bit of adversity, which is known as a fight, where the punches and kicks are now coming back at you. And they've crumbled. Chimaev did not crumble at all. My favorite part about this whole fight was Dana, before the fight, goes on Pat McAfee. This is my favorite part. I loved this. Because the Chimaev experience is exclusive to one thing, which is get this guy in there and get him in there fast. Now, that was the accidental marketing campaign of a lifetime. I have personally never observed anything in this sport work better than that, and that was on accident. Chimaev comes out. 6 days later, he's back on a scale. The 7th day, he's fighting again. Oh, by the way, in a different weight class. That was some Cowboy Cerrone stuff. Even Cowboy Cerrone had to look at that and go, wow, good turnaround. Different weight classes. Totally relevant to the story. I don't know who he fought. I watched those fights. I'm not trying to be a dick. It's just one of those things. You don't remember those kinds of things. We remember this about Chimaev because of the quick turnaround. So then we did it again, and we did it again. Then we ran into the coronavirus. So I loved that Dana is putting that train back on the tracks, which is precisely what he did by booking Chimaev 2 days before the fight even happened. Of course, Dana was talking about the winner going on to fight Colby, but he even knew where it was going to be. He knows when it's going to be. He knows where it's going to be. He knows who it's going to be against. I love that that was done for Chimaev. But as we do get a little bit closer to that, perhaps now that we have evidence of how well Burns can do and how much we love that fight, and those two were not done. I had a coach that used to say this, and it wasn't just to make kids feel better. He would say, sometimes you don't lose, you just run out of time. That's what happened here. Neither one of those boys was done fighting. Neither one of them had nothing left in the tank. Neither one of them thought that anything was settled. I'm just saying I think that we might have to revisit where we go with Chimaev. I believe it should be back to Burns. I should believe it should be a feature match, and I believe we should see it for 25 minutes. We'll see if I get my way. My point is the same, which is nothing went wrong with Chimaev and Burns. You disrespected a three-time world champion who's third in Abu Dhabi, who gave Kamaru Usman his hardest fight. That's what happened. We can't place the blame on Chimaev. This was our mistake. Let's just own the mistake.